我们现在看第6段，在这一节的这个内容上，哈德森教授谈论的是金融如何掏空经济，金融如何体现的是掠夺诈骗，金融并购如何演化成房贷危机。也就是大家知道，这个美国在2001年的新经济危机爆发之后，大量的金融资本涌向房地产，那房地产中的那些没有借贷条件的那些项目也变成了他们要打包的。那打包的结果呢，就是在金融市场上去做这个次贷包的交易，最终演化成2008年的华尔街金融海啸。那这些做法一定是金融垄断资本家跟他的政治上层建筑，跟他的政治家们如果没有这种勾兑，没有这种做法，他就是不可能形成他们的这个获利。所以呢，才说呢，这个金融与政治腐败之间是一种直接的相关性关系。
The fact that you know that the economy is going to collapse in the end means that the time frame of finance capitalism is short term compared to industrial capitalism. If deindustrialization is how you make your money, if you make money by lending money to a corporate raider, and the raider buys a company, fires a labor force, says, we can't afford to pay your pensions anymore, or we're going to go bankrupt. That wipes out your pensions, and we're going to pay the pensions to ourselves as management fees and dividends. Obviously, you're going to leave an empty shell in your wake. Well, that's what the whole financial rating process of the 1980s did. That's what the junk bond and the bank fraud movement of the 2000s did, as the junk mortgage loans of S&L frauds of the 1980s did. You know the economy is going to collapse, so you grab the money and run, and you empty it out as fast as you can, and then you move it to an offshore banking center, a tax enclave, usually in the Cayman Islands or Panama, or you launder it so it appears to be offshore and nobody can find it anymore. So money laundering and the concealment of the wealth that you've emptied out the economy from is a key. Instead of industrial engineering, then, you have financial engineering. You don't have to spend all the time that it takes to develop a new product, to organize its production and its marketing strategy. All you have to do is take over a company that already has all this, and then you just empty it out. The Chicago Tribune newspaper was bought out by a real estate magnate who essentially had put the workers' pensions into Tribune stock, bid it all up, emptied out the company by paying himself, and then wiped out all of the workers' pension savings. And that's been the norm for the last 30 years in the United States. One of the easiest ways of finance capitalism to make money is to wipe out the workers' pension funds. And you can do this, again, finance capital grows by compound interest faster than the real economy. And this compound interest paid to the financial sector, what does it do with the money? Well, it buys other assets. When the banks in America don't lend to factories to be built, they don't lend to increase the means of production. They will let companies pledge their assets as collateral. They will have a mortgage on the factory buildings, on some of the machinery, but it won't lend anything to create money or to create capital. So what the financial sector does, it takes more and more of its interest and capital gains. It makes more loans, and it'll lend more and more of the proportion of a housing price, for instance, to borrowers. When 50 years ago, when I bought my first house in New York, the rule of thumb was banks would, the buyer had to come down with 1/3 of the money as a down payment. And the mortgage, a bank wouldn't lend you a mortgage to buy a house that absorbed more than 1/4 of your income. And that meant that everybody could afford to buy a house that would self-amortize, that is, pay itself off in 30 years. And you could, every white person If you were black, you couldn't get the loan. You wouldn't even be allowed to buy a house in most neighborhoods. But if you're a white person in America, you were able to spend 1/4 of your income buying a house that would pay off, and you would own the house free and clear, no mortgage after 30 years, which is about your remaining working life. Well, gradually, as the financial sector made more and more money, it lent more and more until by 2008, when the real estate crisis came, down to today, the Federal and Mortgage Housing Authority will insure government mortgages that absorb up to 43% of the borrower's income. Well, instead of paying 1/4 of your income for a mortgage, you now have to pay 43% to afford the higher price. And you don't have to have any down payment at all. You don't have to save up any money. You can buy 0 down payment, and you don't even have to pay the interest. You don't have to pay off the mortgage in 30 years. It's called no amortization mortgage, or interest-only mortgage. All of the money you pay for the mortgage will only pay the interest, so you don't build up your equity at all. That is your home ownership. You begin with almost no home ownership, and you never gain the home ownership. And this has occurred on so widely a scale that over half the value of average real estate in the United States is owed to the banks. So what people nominally own their homes, but the real owner that owns claims for more than half the home is the mortgage banking sector. However, the homeowner, not the banker, is responsible for paying the real estate taxes, for paying the upkeep, for paying the water and sewer fees, the electrical fees, and for paying the insurance to make sure that the home isn't wiped out, so that if the home does lose, the bank will get repaid, the homeowner will get wiped out by the insurance, but at least the banker will be repaid by the insurance policy that the homeowner has to borrow and take out is a condition for getting the mortgage to begin with. So you have the financial sector using all of its compound interest, all of this exponential growth in debt service to lend on more and more, to buy assets, to buy more stocks and bonds, to bid up stock prices, to lower bond prices, to raise real estate prices, and to buy other assets like fine arts, Andy Warhol etchings, anything that is an asset, that a trophy that can be something. Well, obviously, as you all know, the real estate and financial markets collapsed in 2008. And at that point, the government came in with the Federal Reserve Bank with what's called quantitative easing, meaning they created the money to simply pay the banks. When the debtors couldn't afford to pay the debts at compound interest, when they couldn't keep the Ponzi scheme going, the role of the central bank was to finance the commercial banking sector to make sure that the creditors and the 1% didn't lose any money. And earlier in this year, 2020, when the Trump administration passed the CARES Act, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, they sent $1,200 to every American whose family earned less than $180,000 per year. Now, they then did a survey. What did people do with this $1,200 a piece? Well, most of the money was usually put into the banks. So the recipients of this $1,200 coronavirus money, because the government knew they were unemployed, they weren't making as much money before, they simply paid down the debt. They didn't use it to buy more goods and services. They didn't use it to revive the economy. And in fact, the economy kept shrinking. And that's essentially the economy now is continuing to shrink, and nobody knows what's going to happen in January when the debts and the rents and the mortgage money that people haven't been paying all summer long during the virus and the unemployment, when all of a sudden that comes through. So what has emerged from all of this, when you put together all of these ways of finance capital making money, you realize that finance capitalism is a form of central planning. But the aim of the central planning is to make asset price gains or finance capital gains, not profits, not higher living standards, not more goods and services, not to expand the economy and expand the market, not to build more housing. It's just to it's to make more money for the 1%, because the 1% has gained control of the government. Just as they've privatized infrastructure and the communication system, and they're privatizing education, they've privatized the government. And in the United States, the government is basically put up for sale to the campaign contributors. And the case went to the Supreme Court that passed the Citizens United law that said, yes, corporations are people, and just as a person can contribute, a corporation can contribute to financial campaigns. And in the United States, not only are politicians elected by buying television time to run commercials and organizing campaigns paid for by their financial contributors, mainly on Wall Street and the real estate sector, but people vote according to what the newspapers and the television stations tell them. That's all privatized. And even judges, even the courts, the judges have to be elected in the United States. So the judges have been, their campaigns are financed by the financial sector that wants the judges to either remake the law to favor finance capitalism, not labor capitalism, not socialism, and not industrial capitalism, but finance capitalism. But even if the law is against monopolies, even if the law is in favor of the renters, not the landlords, the courts are corrupt. And one movie after another in Hollywood is made to show corrupt judges, corrupt courts, the corrupt police force. The government is corrupted by the financial system. And that corruption is called financial efficiency, in taking over the government to plan so that finance can treat, if you pollute the land, if you have an oil spill, if you create a disease, unsafe working conditions, and you kill people, you may have to spend, I think the average is $5 for every worker you kill, and $1 for every $1 million worth of land that you destroy. Breaking the law is a cost of doing business. And that's why lawyers are so important, along with judges under finance capitalism. It's a legalistic society where if you can control the courts, then it doesn't matter what the law says. You can control the application of the law. And this used to be called corrupting the law, but now it's called modernizing or financializing the legal system. So finance capitalism is just the opposite of employing wage labor. And it's the opposite of the classical economic idea of taxing finance and real estate and taxing monopolies or preventing them. Finance capital seeks to avoid paying taxes, make the labor pay the taxes, not the landlords, not the absentee owners. Donald Trump has just released his tax returns, and he claims to have billions of dollars and paid only $750 in income tax. If you look at statistics for the real estate sector in the United States since 1945, the real estate sector pays hardly any income tax at all, because it's given all sorts of tax breaks that we'll talk about in lecture 4 later.